Lucky Luciano, the man who built the American Mafia empire. They called him Lucky. History calls him dangerous. You are not just hearing a crime story, you are hearing the story of the man who professionalized crime. Lucky Luciano transformed the Mafia from chaotic street brutality into a nationwide criminal network fueled by alliances, business discipline, and calculated diplomacy. He eliminated outdated hierarchies. He replaced impulsive violence with structured decision-making. Everything that today defines the American Mafia, the five families, the commission, the nationwide syndicate, traces back to him. This documentary takes you from his childhood in Sicily to the bloody Castellammarese War, through his rise as the architect of organized crime, to his shocking imprisonment, exile, and his death at an airport while discussing a movie about his own life. If you love dark true crime and untold mafia history, like, share, and subscribe now for more. Salvatore Lucania was born on November 24, 1897, in a poor mining town called Lercara Fritti in Sicily, Italy. His father, Antonio Lucania, worked exhausting hours in a sulfur mine, while his mother, Rosalia Caffarella, raised them. In 1906, the family made a life-altering decision to immigrate to the United States. When their ship passed the Statue of Liberty and they arrived at Ellis Island, young Salvatore believed America would give him the freedom to build a better life. Instead, they were pushed into Manhattan's Lower East Side, a neighborhood filled with overcrowded buildings, violent street gangs, drugs, prostitution, ethnic rivalries, and relentless poverty. Salvatore struggled deeply in school because he could not speak English, and classmates bullied him brutally for his accent and foreign appearance. Feeling cornered and humiliated, he decided that education was not the path that would save him. At age 14, he dropped out permanently and took a job delivering hats for $7 a week. Very quickly, he realized that $7 a week would never lift him out of poverty. With sharp awareness, Salvatore formed a small gang of neighborhood boys and began charging younger Jewish kids money for walking them safely through gang-controlled streets. Instead of resisting, most boys complied because they feared being beaten up by rival gangs. However, one boy named Meyer Lansky refused, standing firmly in defiance even though Salvatore had muscle and numbers behind him. Rather than punish Meyer for refusing, Salvatore admired his courage. That moment sparked a partnership that would later become one of the most powerful alliances in organized crime. During these early years, people began calling him Lucky Luciano. Some believed it reflected his success in gambling. Others thought it came from surviving horrific beatings, including a later attack where he was stabbed and left for dead. There was even a rumor that authorities simply mispronounced his last name, Lucania. By age 21, Luciano had been arrested over 20 times for crimes including robbery, illegal gambling, blackmail, and assault, yet he mysteriously avoided prison every time. Police officers considered him lucky. Luciano considered himself strategic. On January 17, 1920, the United States passed the 18th Amendment, making it illegal to manufacture, transport, or sell alcoholic beverages. Instead of reducing alcohol consumption, prohibition created an enormous black market overnight. Bars turned into secret speakeasies. Smugglers transported alcohol in hidden compartments. Corrupt police officers accepted bribes to look the other way. While others saw prohibition as chaos, Luciano saw it as a once-in-a-lifetime business opportunity. Through the 5 Points Gang, he connected with ambitious young mobsters such as Vito Genovese and Frank Costello. Soon after, Luciano began working with Arnold Rothstein, a brilliant Jewish gambler and businessman who became Luciano's most important mentor. Rothstein taught him that crime could be organized like a corporation, with supply chains, territories, investment, partnerships, and financial planning. With financial backing from Rothstein, Luciano, Costello, and Genovese created a massive bootlegging operation, with alcohol flowing into New York from Canada, the Caribbean, and New Jersey. Luciano negotiated distribution deals, bribed law enforcement, and established business partnerships that crossed ethnic lines, something old-school Sicilian bosses considered unacceptable. By 1905, The operation became so profitable that Luciano personally earned the modern equivalent of over $200 million per year. At a time when most of America struggled through economic hardship, Luciano traveled in limousines, wore tailored suits, and dined in the finest restaurants. Then, New York's criminal world was dominated by two powerful bosses, Joe Masiria, Luciano's mentor, who clung to old Sicilian traditions and refused to work with anyone outside the Italian community, Salvatore Maranzano, leader of the Castellammarese clan, who sought total control of New York's criminal landscape and demanded absolute obedience. A bloody conflict erupted between the two factions. It became known as the Castellammarese War, and it paralyzed the city with murders, ambushes, and betrayals. Luciano hated the war because it destroyed profits. He believed that endless violence was bad business. Luciano quietly formed a secret alliance with younger mobsters who wanted change. This group included Frank Costello, Vito Genovese, Albert Anastasia, Joe Bonanno, and a rising name, Carlo Gambino. Luciano's most valuable allies remained Meyer Lansky and Bugsy Siegel, brilliant Jewish criminals who were excluded by Sicilian tradition but embraced by Luciano. To end the war, Luciano made one of the most notorious strategic decisions in Mafia history. In April 1931, Luciano arranged the assassination of his own boss, Joe Masiria. Luciano invited Masiria to a restaurant for lunch, excused himself briefly, and moments later, gunmen entered and shot Masiria to death. After eliminating Masiria, Luciano initially supported Maranzano, but when Maranzano declared himself boss of all bosses, Luciano realized that the title itself was dangerous. Anyone with that much power would always be a target. In September 1931, Luciano sent assassins disguised as government agents into Maranzano's office. They stabbed and shot him, ending his reign and ending the war. Lucky Luciano now controlled the most powerful organized crime network in the United States. Instead of taking the title, boss of all bosses, Luciano abolished it completely. He believed that concentrating power in one man created instability and paranoia. Instead, Luciano created the Commission, a governing board that acted like a criminal parliament. The commission included the 5 families of New York, the Chicago outfit, the Buffalo crime family, delegates from Jewish criminal syndicates, representatives from Detroit and Philadelphia. The commission resolved disputes, approved assassinations, divided territories, and ensured that every family maintained its own leadership without constant war. Luciano formally established the ranking system used today in mob organizations: boss, underboss, consigliere, capos, and soldiers. He made Vito Genovese his underboss and Frank Costello his consigliere. Luciano preserved Sicilian values such as omerta, the code of silence, but he removed the ethnic barriers that older bosses enforced. Under Luciano, Italian, Jewish, and even Irish criminal groups collaborated to maximize profit. In one pivotal moment, when Dutch Schultz wanted to assassinate prosecutor Thomas Dewey, the commission voted against it because they believed killing a public official would bring too much government heat. Schultz disobeyed the commission, and shortly after, he was assassinated. The message was clear: the Mafia no longer followed individuals. They followed Luciano's system. Despite being nearly untouchable, Luciano made one decision that exposed him. In the early 1930s, his organization became involved in prostitution. Although Luciano never personally managed brothels, prosecutors discovered that profits from those operations eventually flowed into his accounts. In 1935, Governor Herbert Lehman appointed Thomas E. Dewey as special prosecutor. Dewey was young, aggressive, and determined to make a name for himself by taking down high-level organized crime. Working with him was Eunice Carter, one of the first black female prosecutors in New York legal history, who brilliantly connected prostitution arrests to Luciano's financial network. In February 1936, police raided nearly 200 brothels across Brooklyn and Manhattan. 87 women and 16 men were arrested. Witnesses claimed Luciano was the mastermind. Luciano fled to Hot Springs, Arkansas, hoping political protection there would keep him safe. However, Dewey issued an interstate warrant, and Luciano was arrested on April 3 and returned to New York. His trial began on May 11. For the first time in his life, Luciano could not escape conviction. On June 7, the jury found him guilty of compulsory prostitution, and he was sentenced to 30 to 50 years in prison. America had taken down its most powerful gangster, or so it seemed. In 1942, during World War II, German submarines were seen near New York, and the United States Navy feared sabotage at the docks, which were controlled by Mafia labor unions. Desperate for protection, the Navy approached Meyer Lansky, who arranged a meeting with Luciano. Luciano agreed to help, ensuring that there were no labor strikes, no sabotage, and that Mafia contacts in Sicily aided U.S. forces during the invasion of Italy. This classified collaboration was later called Operation Underworld. On January 3, 1946, in recognition of his wartime assistance, Luciano's sentence was officially commuted. However, freedom came with a price. He was deported to Italy permanently. He left the United States and was never allowed to return. Luciano could not accept being cut off from the empire he built. Using forged travel documents, he secretly moved to Cuba, where he invested in casinos, hotels, and gambling resorts. In December 1946, Luciano organized a major conference in Havana, attended by the most influential crime bosses in America. They discussed narcotics expansion, casino business, and resolving issues surrounding Bugsy Siegel's failing Flamingo Hotel project in Las Vegas. Genovese encouraged Luciano to reclaim absolute power over the Mafia, but Luciano refused. He insisted that the commission should continue to rule collectively. When U.S. officials discovered Luciano's presence in Cuba, they demanded his removal. Cuba complied, and Luciano was forced to return to Italy. This time, the exile was final. Luciano lived under constant surveillance in Italy. Italian authorities monitored his movements, restricted his travel, and frequently detained him for questioning. Although he remained connected to criminal operations through intermediaries, his influence declined as new American bosses such as Genovese, Gambino, and Costello took center stage. In Italy, Luciano found emotional companionship with a Milanese ballerina named Igia Lissoni, with whom he shared a relationship until her death from breast cancer in 1959. Luciano never had children. He once admitted that he refused to bring a child into the world, only to have them grow up carrying the weight and shame of his legacy. On January 26, 1962, Lucky Luciano arrived at Naples airport to meet a film producer who planned to make a movie about his life. Moments after shaking hands with the producer, Luciano collapsed and died from a heart attack. Ironically, even in death, he was finally free to tell his story. He created the commission, which regulated crime like a board of directors. He formed alliances across ethnic lines, proving that business superseded tradition. He built the five-family structure that still exists today. In 1998, Time magazine named him one of the most influential Sherpas of the 20th century, not because of violence, but because he introduced structure, efficiency, and strategy into organized crime. He did not just participate in the Mafia, he is the Mafia.